you talk about how to embrace radical acceptance, and you share the story of the scorpion and the swan, which there are many different children's books. My youngest has one with it's like an alligator, and I think there's a bunny sitting on a fox. I don't know. Anyway, that's this tale where the scorpion asks the swan for a ride, and charms the swan and love bombs it, and then of course the swan trusts it and gets to their side. And what happens? You can imagine what the scorpion does. But you talk about a few different things on how to embrace radical acceptance. You talk about grieving the death of the narcissist, gaslight resistant, and rewriting your story, and forgiveness. And I thought this was really interesting and powerful, and that's why I want you to share it. I would think that forgiveness would be the first thing. Like, I'm going to forgive, I'm going to choose to see this a different way and go from there. And most people would think, of course, forgiveness is such an important part of moving on, but you make such a valid point on why, when dealing with the narcissist, dare I say, it's dangerous. I mean, how would you explain that?
Yeah, that section of the book is called The Treachery of Forgiveness. And I have to say, forgiveness really is a dangerous space in narcissistic relationships. While there's a really robust literature out there that talks about the virtues of forgiveness, it doesn't apply here. Because forgiveness, when you look at the dictionary definition, is to also cease to feel resentment towards the offender. Let me tell you this, most people in these relationships do not cease to feel resentment. Why? Because a narcissistic person is a serial offender. They keep doing the bad thing, and many of them will receive the forgiveness almost as permission of like, okay, well, looks like I'm just going to be able to keep doing this and get away with it. And so people keep forgiving because that's what they're told. In fact, many people are forgiveness shamed. Well, you're a very cold person. You're not going to forgive. But the research also shows that if you forgive someone who repeatedly betrays you or harms you or, betrays your trust, that actually harms the person who's doing the forgiving. So forgiving is not this easy sort of like kind of whiteout that makes everything go away. Forgiveness can be extraordinarily powerful when you're dealing with two self-reflective people and the person being forgiven receives the forgiveness and turns that into meaningful change so that the person sees that the forgiveness they engaged in, which is not an easy thing to do when someone's harmed us, but that forgiveness turns into growth. That's how it's supposed to work. That is not how it works in a narcissistic relationship. And many people will say, I was either shamed for not forgiving, so I forgave, and then they did it to me again. And then I felt foolish. And I thought, well, maybe I'm the sucker. It's actually called the doormat effect. And so I would say that forgiveness is an incredibly personal decision. But the point I make very clear to survivors is that it is not required for healing.